Live from Washington, Crossfire. On the left, Mike Kinsley. On the right, Pat Buchanan. Tonight, lawyers fight back. In the Crossfire, attorney Raoul Felder. And in Detroit, George Googasian, president of the Michigan State Bar.
Good evening. Welcome to Crossfire. First thing to do, let's kill all the lawyers, says a character in Shakespeare. On July 1st, a madman invaded a San Francisco law firm with 2 automatic weapons and murdered 8 people before killing himself. A suicide note blamed lawyers for his financial problems. And only the week before, the killer had been seen laughing hysterically at a lawyer joke. That was too much for the president of the California Bar Association. He called for a moratorium on lawyer jokes and for new laws classifying violence against lawyers as a, quote, hate crime with special increased punishment. And that suggestion has set off a national debate about lawyers. Are they being unfairly abused? Consider the nasty portrait of lawyers at work in the current hit movie, The Firm.
What precisely were those instructions?
That you were in great demand, and I should make certain that we obtain your services before a bidding situation developed.
How did you go about making certain?
I bribed a clerk in the Harvard Law Placement Office for the exact amount of the highest offer, and then added 20%.
What's a nice guy like Tom Cruise doing in a profession like that? Your witness, counselor.
Raoul Felder, isn't it true that you lawyers have gotten your reputation the old-fashioned way? You've earned it. You've earned it.
No, what happens is we labor in a vineyard where one person wins and one person loses, and nobody likes to be convinced that they lost because they're wrong. They lost because the lawyer's no good. And we get a bum rap.
Why do you think the American people in general have such contempt for the legal profession that they enjoy mockery and jokes about it as for no other profession? They don't make those kind of jokes about doctors.
No, I think we're somewhere between used car salesmen and axe murderers in public. But a lot of that is because of you guys. By you guys, I don't mean you. I mean the media. You see stuff like that. 1920 movies, get me a mouthpiece. Doesn't matter who's telling the truth. The best mouthpiece money can buy. It doesn't work like that in real life. But yet we take the rap and we're getting injured.
But aren't you really seen as, excuse me, let me raise it. I think one reason is that you're seen as, excuse me, a parasitical class that shows up at train wrecks and auto accidents and horrible, messy divorces when marriages are broken down, and you come in and extort the maximum amount out of one of the other partners by threatening one of them with his, with bringing out all this information about him, and you get a huge cut of the take.
Listen, not all lawyers. And first of all, when somebody's injured and they're in the hospital or a spouse has run off or somebody's not supportive, who are you going to write to? A social worker? You're going to call a commentator?
The injured party gets 15%. You guys are in there taking a huge cut every time. The bigger the disaster, Bhopal, they got a whole plane going over there, you guys.
That ain't exactly true. It's quite true that there's some inequities in the legal profession, and that's one of them. I think these malpractice lawyers are making too much, and we're all paying part of that.
How about the divorce lawyers? Or matrimonial attorneys, excuse me.
I don't think any very close to home. I don't think so. I think we earn our money. I think we get results.
How did you get results for Robin Givens?
By working very hard.
What did you say? Listen, Mike, we're going to bring out the left hand, the jab in the living room?
By doing my homework. You know how you make an English law and put some seed into 20 years, for 200 years you roll it.
How much?
I spent a lifetime to bring on
How much did you get out of Mike Tyson for Robin Givens, and how much did you get for good old Raoul?
Less than you think.
All right, I know it. It's got to be less than I think. How much did you get?
We ain't talking. But the fact is, I think whatever I got, I earned. But I think there's certain things gentlemen don't talk about. Women and how much money they make. How much was her?
Did you agree, women? How much did she get?
I would love to tell you, but part of that deal
was that nobody was supposed to know. Part of the deal was keep it quiet.
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Googasian, dentists cause a lot more pain and suffering and discomfort than lawyers, but you don't hear dentist jokes the way you hear lawyer jokes. Surely you lawyers must accept some responsibility for the fact that you're America's favorite whipping boy.
Well, absolutely. One of the things that I think the profession really has to understand, and the public has to understand about our profession, is that there are faults, there are problems within the profession, and we're trying to address those problems, and we should be addressing those problems, and Americans should be asking lawyers very tough questions and insisting on answers from lawyers. I think that's a message that has to be gotten across to the public. If your lawyer isn't serving you well, then fire your lawyer. Find a lawyer who will serve you
Well, the problem is that he may be serving you well, but he's not serving somebody else too well. There's always an opponent. Look, do you agree with the head of the California bar, Mr. Saferstein, I believe, that it ought to be a hate crime to commit violence against a lawyer? Why is it worse? It's not obviously it's a terrible thing to murder a lawyer, but is it worse to murder a lawyer than to murder anyone else?
I don't think so, and I don't agree with that approach. I don't agree with that statement. I think that lawyers in the courtroom are capable of giving it out, and when they're out of the courtroom, we have to be willing to take it.
How about
So
that,
I think
Mr.
we're
Felder?
part of the general public, and I don't think we have to have it any other way. I don't think we should have it any other way.
I don't think it's that simple. I think the three criteria that have to be met. If somebody's persecuted because of their profession, and if their profession is essential to the running of the country, and it is a real threat, then I think it should be a hate crime. Because other than
How about
that,
against journalists? We're covered by the First Amendment. You know, you guys
I
aren't
think you're
covered by
right. I think you have a point.
Exactly.
I think you have a point. But
Somebody
the question
throws
is,
a right hand at me ought to be
What?
charged with a hate crime.
no, but I don't
Well,
think
and
there's a.
Go
and
ahead.
it's lawyers,
Yes.
it's lawyers, Pat, that protect your First Amendment rights, and as well they should. That's part of the basis on which this country is founded, our right to speak out.
Well, where did
and that
Mr.
includes lawyer bashing.
Where did Mr. Saferstein get the idea? I mean, besides this one terrible episode in San Francisco, has there been a wave of violence against lawyers, unless you count jokes?
Come on, Mike.
violence?
I was stalked by a woman. The FBI had to arrest this woman and finally put her in a mental institution for 8 months. It happens all the time
what was her
because she was
problem?
mentally deranged, and she threatened me and other lawyers and a chief federal judge.
Come on,
And
Raoul.
I think
Every
it happens.
made the whole
journalist,
point.
every radio talk show host gets death threats. I mean, you're not making yourself out to be a victim now of society, are you?
No, but I think
I meet
lawyers
people
are a
every
special
day
kind-
who probably would like to
Yes.
stalk Pat.
Yeah, but I think if you take chiropodists, they don't get death threats, but there are certain people whose profession makes them susceptible to this, and whose profession is essential to the running of the country. And if you don't have special, you know what a hate law simply means is an additional penalty.
All right, you
affixed
say
to it.
essential to
Yes.
running the country. Now, this
Yes.
is one of the problems. I'll tell you why
Yes.
a lot of people despise lawyers, is the regulations and rules and laws made by the politicians become increasingly complex,
Yes.
whether it's EPA or taxes or the legal system,
Yes.
and people don't want to hire a lawyer.
Yes.
But they do, and they pay them a tremendous sum of money simply because you guys know the ways around the rules and regs that the average guy doesn't know. And then when they give you that money, they don't see what they're getting for it. They give it to a doctor, they say the doctor cured me.
Yeah.
They give it to you guys, and
No,
they don't
one of
see
the
what they
problems
got.
is we don't have a secret language like doctors with instruments and so forth. Everybody's a Perry Mason. Everybody watches television, they're a Perry Mason.
No.
But what is your alternative?
But look, if you start a small business today,
yes.
it used to be you'd go start it. Now you got to go get the lawyer. He's got to go down and work on the city council. He's got to do this and that
Hey,
for
Pat,
you.
it's not the
It's
lawyer's
the
fault. It's the
let's be
fault of the
fair.
guys down the street.
It's the lawyer
legislatures do
politicians that are doing
yeah.
that.
But let's be
Mr.
fair to
Googasian,
the
go
lawyers
ahead.
in this process. When a law is passed, it's not the lawyer's fault that the law is passed. If you look at the
That's the
percentage
point.
of people in the legislature and in the Congress, the percentage of lawyers is very, very low.
Are
It's
you
not the
kidding?
lawyers
No,
that are
you're wrong.
responsible for
You're
these
wrong.
That's not
laws
true.
that are
I mean,
being
that's the
passed.
highest
You're wrong.
profession in there. I'll bet it's half of the individuals in there.
I think you're
It is
probably
not.
right.
It's not even close.
disproportionate
It's
share. I think he's
15%.
right.
He's 15%.
I don't
It
believe
is
that.
true. It is true, though, isn't it, Mr. Googasian, that to some extent the law can be seen as a protection racket, where the lawyers create the situation and they go to you and they say, you know, it's a nice little company you got here. It'd be too bad if someone sued it, or there's a nice little something or other, and we're going to pass these regulations. You better hire me to help get you through them.
Mike, you know,
Well,
nobody...
hopefully not.
Yeah.
I think it's no different than when I have to fill out my federal income tax.
Right.
I have to go to a CPA to have
That's
that
the
done
same thing.
because
Yes.
I'm no longer capable of interpreting that law. And if Congress passes these laws and the state legislatures pass these laws that require professional assistance, then you're going to need lawyers. But that doesn't mean that that's the fault of the
But it seems to me,
profession.
wouldn't you say that at the very least doctors do a better job of encouraging preventive medicine, encouraging you to be healthy, than lawyers, so you don't need to go to a doctor when you're sick, than lawyers do to create situations,
Wait, first
to
of all-
alleviate
Well,
the problems when
the
you need
answer
to go
to
a
that is
lawyer?
this. When a doctor is operating on you, there isn't another party that's involved in the process that is opposed to what the doctor's trying to do at that time. In the legal process, when a corporation or an individual seeks to do something, there's another party that's represented that seeks to block that. So the analogy doesn't hold up.
And also, you know, no profession polices themselves like lawyers. You have a malpractice case against a doctor, you'll never find a doctor testify against another lawyer. They come out of the woodwork. Every lawyer jumps on every lawyer.
Both armies get paid. The reason is both sides get paid.
No, it's that.
You think that's an attractive aspect of the legal profession?
Absolutely. I
Mr.
think we're
Felder?
hypercritical of ourselves. We're not coy about attacking other lawyers. We police ourselves. We're regulated more than any profession.
Going.
Yes,
When we come back, can lawyers regain the confidence of the American people, or is it a lost cause? Welcome back. We're talking about one of the last minorities about whom you can still make jokes in public, lawyers. And why is this so? Our guests are George Googasian, president of the Michigan State Bar, and Raoul Lionel Felder, a divorce lawyer from the Big Apple, who is right here in Washington, D.C. Michael?
Mr. Googasian, I better confess at this point that I am a lawyer too, or at least I went to law school. And one of the most astonishing things I learned in law school was this so-called American rule having to do with who pays the legal bills. If somebody comes out of nowhere and sues you, totally unjustified case, and loses, you're still stuck paying your own legal bills. In every other country in the world, the winner gets his legal bills taken care of by the loser. Now, Dan Quayle suggested a couple years ago that that be changed. Wouldn't that be a very sensible change?
Well, Quayle suggested a lot of things that perhaps were not sensible, but on this particular subject, that is the rule in most jurisdictions. It certainly is in Michigan. We have mediation and we have offers of judgment. And after that process comes into effect, the losing party has to pay actual attorney fees and costs of the winning party. So that is, in effect, I believe, in most jurisdictions. It certainly is here in Michigan.
Well, maybe things have changed since I graduated from law school.
As a matter of fact, Mike, in most jurisdictions, it's not so. They award costs, but it's minuscule. The worst of that you see are criminal cases. A government or state indicts somebody, and they're acquitted. And you think, well, my God, their legal fees ought to be paid. They're unjustly accused. And no, they have to. And many of these prosecutions ruin the person who's been acquitted.
There's no doubt about that.
Yes.
I've had
A number of your friends, some of them weren't acquitted.
Countless of my friends, some of them weren't acquitted. But that's one of the problems is I'll tell you, I know one fellow that just, well, of course, who is it? The fellow that the former Assistant Secretary of State said rather than fight for his reputation and bankrupt himself, I'll take 2 misdemeanor pleas.
Yeah, it happens all too frequently.
Doesn't that happen in civil suits too, in torts and malpractice, that people, a doctor will settle even if he feels he's in the right, because to fight it he's going to get stuck with a huge legal cost. And I can't believe that these doctors routinely get their legal costs paid for if they survive the case by the plaintiff who's suing.
Well, sir, I will say that number one, in Michigan, and I think in all jurisdictions, the insurance company would pay all legal fees. Number two, in Michigan, if there is a mediation or an offer of judgment and the plaintiff does not exceed the mediation or exceed the offer of judgment that's made by the defendant, they have to pay actual attorney fees.
Actual attorney fees, you mean the actual amount the doctor or the insurance company is shelled out?
Absolutely. It is the number of hours times a reasonable rate, and it can amount to thousands of dollars, and it happens every day.
All right, let me, Ralph, but look, doesn't that sound like an excellent idea?
It's a good idea. That's the state of utopia. It doesn't happen most places in the United States.
But it seems to me something like that would really put an end to a lot of these frivolous suits.
Absolutely.
Because I know that, our own company, I'm sure when people sue big corporations, they say, look, rather than go through the whole court process, would you settle for $15,000 and go away? I mean, these nuisance suits are very, very common.
Let me suggest another problem. The problem is the courts are not adequately funded, so they're tied up, they're inundated, they're drowning, and people take advantage of that delay. That's part of the game, building up fees, more and more discovery. If the public would have the legislature appropriate proper funds to the courts, the whole system would move quickly.
One of the points is that lawyers themselves are filing too many suits, that 18 million lawsuits Dan Quayle said were filed in the United States in 1989. The number tripled in the federal courts. Go ahead.
Let me respond to that, because that's at best disingenuous to say 18 million cases. In the first place, at least a third of those are divorce cases. But when you talk about what Quayle was talking about,
You're talking to the fellow that filed the majority of them.
yeah, when you're talking, though, about what Quayle was talking about, you're talking about tort cases. And tort cases, most people think make up most of those cases. They actually make up 1.8% of that 18 million. That's what your tort
All right,
litigation
well, let's talk
is.
about the tort cases and the awards, punitive damages. Why not set a limit of something like punitive damages can be no more than 3 times compensatory damages? One of the reasons lawyers are viewed, I think, badly is these gigantic $100 million awards, and the whole system is viewed badly. Why not just say treble damages if it's for punitive
I don't think it's so simple. I think there are more. First of all, why do we have this? We're a litigious society. We're a frontier society. We're a young society. People run to court. They don't shoot it out. So that's why we have all that in America. But it's not the lawyers who engender that. If somebody says something, somebody spits it, says it wrong, sue them. That's our society. That's the way we're built. The malpractice judgments, there's a lot of wrong there, and the lawyers are trying to work the thing out. You get a $100 million verdict, the lawyer walks away with lots of money. That's wrong. That's wrong, and everybody knows that's wrong.
But those lawyers, the Trial Lawyers Association, one's behind Ralph Nader, strongly behind, yes they are, and strongly behind Bill Clinton. They block these reforms in every single state where they've tried.
Is supported malpractice reform that's practically the same as the Bush agenda, which Bush just brazed and never did anything about. Bill Clinton is actually doing it in his health care reform, Pat.
I want to make a point about the number of suits filed, because there was a 1991 study by the Rand Institute for Civil Justice, and Americans file fewer lawsuits today than did their colonial counterparts per capita. Fewer.
Yeah,
today
but wait a minute, they've tripled since 1960. And I'm sure you might have had a few people filing a number of suits or something. But today, look, we got, 700,000 lawyers. The Japanese got 10,000. The cost of litigation in this country adds $300 billion.
Let's ask Mr. Googasian that. Why is Japan able to run with 1/70th the number of lawyers we have in this country and run rather successfully?
Well, I think there are 2 answers to that. The first is that in Japan, you have a number of people who do the same things that lawyers do that are not called lawyers.
That's right.
Whereas in America, everyone, whether you're in court, whether you're a divorce litigator, whether you work for government, whether you work in the corporation, all of those are considered lawyers. So you're not comparing apples to oranges. So actually, the number between Japan and the United States is not as disparate as you would think.
Mr. Googasian, why do you think that they are malicious jokes, some of them, about lawyers, and everybody relishes them about lawyers? Why do you think the reputation of lawyers in America, if they're doing the good job you're talking about, why is their reputation such as it is?
No, I have not said that we have done a good job across the board. There are many problems with the legal profession, and we need to address those problems. And I think that responsible people in the ABA and responsible people in the bar associations across the country are trying to do that. They're looking at client concerns. They're trying to respond to the clients, getting the lawyers to be client conscious.
Well, what about punitive damages, sir? What about punitive damages? Isn't Pat right? I hate to say it.
Well, in Michigan, punitive damages are not allowed. We don't have any such animal in the state of Michigan.
Michigan sounds like a phenomenal state here. All these reforms have already been made.
It's a wonderful place to be from, Mr. Buchanan. You'd enjoy it.
Well, I don't think it's so simple. Punitive damage, you're dealing with a rich man, he could say I could pay 3 times. It has to be proportionate to punish a person.
Don't you have an absurd system where, A, the jury gets to decide, not the judge, and where you can, if a company gets sued, say it did something terribly wrong, you sue them on behalf of one client, he gets punitive damages, has to punish them, then 18 other people sue him on behalf of 18 other clients, punitive damages again and again and again. There's no control over the system.
No, when they set punitive damages, they're supposed to set an amount that's punitive. That's the key to it. Not treble damages, which may not be punitive to somebody else.
But punitive damage, what you're taking is, whatever the damage done to the individual, you're saying, he gets that, compensatory.
Then punished,
and then the punishment, triple the compensatory. I mean, what more do you need? Even, I don't care whether
because there are cases where that would not matter to a rich company, somebody that does a environmental crime. It would not matter treble damages to compensatory damage. So it has to be tied in some way with a theory of punishment.
Look, let's take even the environmental crime. Suppose somebody does one of those jobs.
$500,000 in compensatory damages to a large corporation. It's worth $1.5 million. Take a gamble.
If all he's done is $500,000 worth of damage to the environment, you make him clean it up, and then you charge him an extra $1.5 million. That's not fair.
But there are some events that are not that simple.
Relationship. There should be some relationship to the punitive damages, and it makes sense to me, although we don't have it here in Michigan, it makes sense to me that if there's going to be a punitive damage award, that courts set up a special fund, and that the monies be put in the special fund to correct whatever problem was created by the action of the corporation, be it environmental or otherwise, rather than go into the pocket of one individual plaintiff. And I think that would be more appropriate.
Okay, we're out of time. Thank you, Mr. Googasian, out there in the legal heaven, Michigan. Thank you, Mr. Felder, here in the legal hell of Washington, D.C.
New York.
Pat and I will quarrel in just a moment. Well, Pat, lawyers are pretty unpopular, but the last time I looked at these opinion polls about different professions, journalists ranked pretty low and politicians were rock bottom. Now, I don't know how you classify yourself, but I don't think either one of us is in too good a shape in that point of view.
Well, I've been two of those, and you are two of those yourself, so I think they're deserved. But one of the reasons I think that you got all these legal costs is all the laws and the bureaucrats, regulations. I mean, George Googasian says he can't fill out his income tax. Neither can I, and I used to be an accountant.
Well, a lot of those income taxes are complicated because high-priced lobbyists, including lawyers, have written loopholes for various professions. Well, you're in favor of most of those.
No, listen, I would be in favor of clearing out. If they could put the income tax on a single card, why not do it?
If they could fly to the moon with wings, why not do it?
We used to be able to, Michael.
Never. From the left, I'm Mike Kinsley. Good night for Crossfire.
The first form was one page. From the right, Pat Buchanan. Join us tomorrow night for yet another edition of Crossfire.
And Prime News is next. I call Jean Meserve to the stand to tell us what's coming up. Jean?
Thanks, Mike. Ahead on Prime News, Des Moines area hospitals brace for an outbreak of flood-related illnesses and death in Mogadishu as an angry Somali mob retaliates for a UN attack. Those stories and more next on Prime News.